Chapter 16. They all looked at Diana, and it was Nate who said, "If we believe Missy was abducted from your family, Diana, then I think your father would be the last one we could suspect of suppressing that sort of evidence. They can't have known who took their child, let alone where she was, or they would have gotten her back." "That's true enough, but suppose my father only found out after Missy was murdered." "How?" Nate shook his head. "Colin claims he never knew who Missy really belonged to, so even if his statement wasn't initially suppressed, no one else would have been notified of her death. And as Quentin has pointed out more than once, there was precious little media coverage. Never a picture run in the press that your parents might have recognized, even if the story had made the news outside this area." Diana was afraid after she sounded paranoid. Diana was afraid she sounded paranoid about all this, but Quentin kept telling her to trust herself, her feelings and intuitions, and that's what she was trying to do. She didn't know who had murdered Missy, but she was utterly certain her father had had a hand in the subsequent investigation, and that he was responsible for the suppression of facts and information. No wonder Quentin had found the trail to Missy's killer so cold for so long. Holding her voice steady, she said, "I don't know how it happened, but there is something I do know." She looked at Quentin. "When I talked to Dad on the phone, when I told him where I was, he reacted. He was surprised, unsettled, maybe even afraid. Because I was here at the lodge. That's what shook him. And why would it have if there wasn't something here he didn't want me to find out about?" "Secrets," Quentin said. "At the very least, your father knew of the lodge. Had he ever stayed here?" "We can check the records," Stephanie said. But Diana was shaking her head. "Dad hates resort-type hotels, always has. He stays in one of two types of places when he travels: downtown penthouse hotel suites in the city, or houses or apartments he rents for the duration. Staying at a place like the lodge, miles from anywhere, surrounded by mountains and scenery, would be his idea of hell." Quentin accepted that with a nod. "The lodge is very well known, though, so he could easily have heard of it, but as you say, he reacted very strongly to the knowledge that you were here, and there has to be a reason for that." He frowned. "Colin said he'd overheard enough to know that Laura's own child had died and she'd abducted Missy. My question is, who was she talking to when he overheard the conversation?" Nate grimaced. "Yeah, I sort of interrupted you, didn't I? Sorry about that." "It's okay. The way he shut down after telling us about his statement, I have a hunch he told us everything he meant to, and no amount of questioning would have gotten anything else out of him. Not tonight, anyway." Diana said, "I wonder if he overheard that conversation before or after Missy was killed. He didn't say." "Does it matter?" Stephanie asked. "It might," Quentin said. "If Laura was unbalanced enough to have abducted someone else's child to raise as her own, Missy's murder may well have pushed her even farther over the edge. In that state, she could have told anybody the truth about Missy's parentage." Nate asked, "You don't remember how Laura acted after the murder?" "Not really. In those days, there was a doctor on staff here, and I have the vague recollection that he kept her under sedation at least through the funeral. We left just a few weeks later. I remember seeing Laura at the funeral, but not after that." Somewhat tentatively, Diana said she'd kept the secret of Missy's abduction for a long time, years. "It makes more sense to me that she might have talked about it only after Missy was murdered." Nate was making a note in the small black notebook he carried. "I'll ask Colin. I definitely want to talk to that guy again." Stephanie sat on the arm of a chair and said, "What creeps me out is the bit about him putting flowers on Missy's grave. Isn't that the sort of thing a killer might do?" "It's possible," Quentin said, "but not in this case, I think. Besides, what he said about his alibi was right. He couldn't possibly have killed Missy." Nate looked at Quentin. "Been meaning to ask you, by the way, about that hunch of yours. It seemed to come out of nowhere. As far as I can remember, you've never asked anything about Missy's grave before now." "I know. A little voice told me now was the time. I've learned to listen to that little voice." He shook his head. "It was when you told us the other maid had identified Cullen as the man she'd seen talking to Ellie Weeks. Up until then, I was interested in Cullen only because he'd been here that summer 25 years ago, and because we found that trap door locked in his tack room." "And you still believe all of this is connected?" Quentin nodded without hesitation. Grimly, Nate said, "Well, whether it is or isn't, this is one murder that is damn well not going to go unsolved." He checked his watch, ship after midnight. "Once Sally and Ryan finish processing the scene, I okayed the removal of the body. It'll be in the hospital morgue by now. Doc said he'd do a preliminary check, but I want the post done by the state crime lab." "And I bet they're backed up," Quentin said. "It won't be fast," Nate conceded, "but it'll be thorough, and that's what I want. In the meantime, we have whatever forensic evidence my CSI team found, and goodness knows we've got plenty of questions." "Yeah," Quentin said, "we've got plenty of those." "Captain, do you realize I have to be up in a few hours?" The housekeeper's voice was frosty. Nate wasn't intimidated. "One of your maids was brutally murdered not 12 hours ago, Mrs. Kincaid. I would think you'd want to help in any way possible to find out who killed her." As unaffected by his tone as he was by hers, she snapped, "In the morning would be soon enough for your questions. No one here is going to be running away. Still, I'm sure you won't mind answering a few questions tonight." Nate deliberately placed his notebook on the spotless butcher block work island in the huge kitchen, turning the pages until he found the notes he'd made earlier. Mrs. Kincaid crossed her arms over her ample bosom and waited, standing on the other side of the island. She hadn't suggested they adjourn to the other room, nor try to make themselves more comfortable in this one. "Well?" Nate didn't allow himself to be rushed, and refused to admit, even to himself, that he found the big empty kitchen very cold and more than a little spooky, somehow, especially so late at night. He checked his notes, then said to her, "You informed Ms. Boyd that you believed Ellie Weeks was up to something, did you not?" "I did." "What was it you suspected?" "I'm not a mind reader, Captain, but I've worked with young girls long enough to know when one of them is up to no good, and Ellie was." "So you were watching her?" "I was keeping a close eye on her, of course." "Was there anything in particular she did to alert you that something was going on with her?" "I saw her hanging around Ms. Boyd's office. Her duties took her nowhere near that area." "She could have just been passing through on her way to another part of the hotel." "That's what she said." "You didn't believe her?" "I know when I'm being lied to." Nate wondered, but didn't question her on that point. What else? She kept slipping out to the smoking porch every chance she got, for one thing. That was suspicious. She didn't smoke. So what do you think she was doing out there? Probably using her cell phone. The maids aren't allowed to carry the things while on duty, but some of them sneak and do it anyway, to call their boyfriends. That seems innocent enough, Nate observed, making a note to look for that cell phone. Ellie didn't have a boyfriend, Mrs. Kincaid smiled thinly. Here, anyway. Meaning? Meaning she might have been stupid enough to get involved with one of our guests. That was, of course, forbidden. She would have been dismissed the instant I had proof. That's what you were watching for, proof? She would have betrayed herself sooner or later, they all do. Nate frowned. You've had that problem before? Maids getting involved with guests? Well, men will be men, won't they, Captain? Thinking about the old double standard, Nate said, then why blame the maids? Because they aren't being paid to provide entertainment for guests. The lodge is not that sort of place. Mrs. Kincaid drew herself up even more stiffly. I've told you when I last saw Ellie and what I said to her when I did. If you have further questions, Captain, I'm sure you can ask them in the morning. I'm going to bed. Nate didn't try to stop her. He gazed after her for a moment, then looked around the spotless, curiously sterile kitchen and felt a shiver for no reason he could explain. Though he couldn't help wondering if the ghost of a murdered maid was trying to get his attention. Bullshit, he muttered, but without much force. Without much force at all. She wasn't very big, was she? Quentin turned a bit on the sofa to better look at Diana where she sat on the other end. She was leaning forward, elbows on her knees, as she gazed into the cold fireplace nearby. The lounge was empty except for the two of them, and though it was nearly 1 a.m, neither of them had suggested they call it a night. Ellie, you mean? Diana nodded, still without looking at him. She wasn't very big at all and couldn't have been more than, 22, 23? About that. We didn't talk about her much. She was lying there dead, murdered, just a few yards away, and we hardly talked about her. We were all thinking about her, you know that. I guess. Quentin drew a breath and let it out slowly. Without a certain amount of detachment, cops couldn't do their job. Not for long, anyway. But what was my excuse? It isn't an excuse, Diana. It's just the way things are. Death's always around us. We all learn to deal with it the best way we can. Sometimes just moment to moment. But you, of all people, know it's not an ending, or at least not an absolute ending. She turned her head then and looked at him, frowning. I hadn't thought, but that should make me feel differently about death, shouldn't it? That I know there's some kind of existence beyond it. That I know we don't just stop. Maybe you will feel differently about it one day. But not today? Quentin hesitated. A lot's happened in a very short time. You probably haven't even begun to process it all. Have you? He found the question surprising at first, but then not so much. You're wondering why I haven't asked you any details about Missy? You've spent so many years thinking about her, working to solve her murder, going over the facts again and again. It's been an obsession. Yes, it has. So, yeah, I guess I'm surprised you haven't asked me more about her. What could I ask is if she looks the same. I know she does. If she's happy. I know she isn't. If she'll help me solve her murder. I know she won't. She said it wouldn't help me to know who killed her. That it wouldn't help you. I don't know what she meant by that. I'm sorry. It's all right. Diana shook her head. It isn't all right because now you're here and Missy's here. Not so far away, in one sense, not with me here too. Almost close enough to touch. I touched her hand, and it was surprisingly warm. And then I opened my eyes, and it was your hand I was touching. Quentin didn't say anything, just looked at her. We're connected, aren't we, the three of us? I'm connected to Missy by blood. And you're connected to us by what happened 25 years ago. It's a little more complicated than that, he said finally. Is it? Why is it? Because we're alive and Missy's dead. Diana turned that over in her mind. I don't understand. I know you don't. It's another thing you haven't really had the time or the emotional energy to process. Her frown returned. Is there something between us, you and me? What do you think? No, what do you feel? A little laugh escaped her. I feel raw, overloaded, numb 1 minute, and incredibly aware of everything around me the next. I feel afraid a lot and anxious, confused, but not in the gray time. Isn't that strange? In the gray time, I feel calm and sure of myself. It's like pulling on a comfortable pair of jeans I've worn so long they're almost a part of me. Quentin nodded. That's when you're tapped in, connected to your abilities, when you're centered, balanced, whole. And when I'm here, in the everyday world of the living, why can't I be centered here? Why can't I be balanced and whole? You can be, you will be, but it takes time, Diana. You might have learned to do it by now, but they cheated you out of that time with the drugs and the therapy. You have a lot of catching up to do. Consciously. Again, Quentin nodded. Your subconscious has been learning for years, obviously, maybe all your life, in dreams during those blackouts. I thought of the dreams and the blackouts as me being out of control, she murmured half to herself. But I was most in control then, wasn't I? Quentin sensed danger in that question, though he couldn't have said just why. Maybe, on some level, but as gifted as you are, that isn't your natural state, Diana. Isn't it? No, of course not. We exist in the everyday world of the living. Physically and emotionally, this is where we belong. What we tap into in order to use our abilities is a place we visit, not a place we live. She looked at him as if she would have asked another question, but instead said, I suppose you're right. Again, Quentin felt uneasy without knowing why. The little voice he sometimes heard was silent, and yet he had the sense of something being slightly off, even wrong. Are you okay? He asked. I'm tired, she smiled faintly. It's been a long day. Yeah. Look, until we know what's going on here, I'd feel better if you didn't spend the night in your cottage. Why don't you take my bed and I'll bunk down on the sofa bed in the sitting room? She didn't exactly protest, but said, Nate has officers patrolling the grounds. I know. Still. There are plenty of empty rooms here in the main building. Steadily, he repeated, I know. Diana looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, thanks. And it wasn't until a few minutes later, when they were in his suite, and she was about to close the door of the bedroom, that Diana went back to a subject they had touched on earlier. There is something between us. At the moment, there was a door between them, a door she was about to close. He stood there looking down at her, wanting to say more than he knew he should. Not now, not yet. She had been through so much, and her own words told him she was too confused and unsettled to be able to handle anything more right now. So all he said was, there was always something between us, Diana. Try to get some sleep. At first it seemed she'd question that, but finally she just nodded and murmured good night and closed the door. Diana didn't know if it would work, whatever control she sometimes managed to have while in the gray time. The fact that, as far as she knew, she herself had never instigated that process. She had always been called, summoned really, by one or more of the guides, dragged from sleep or into one of the scary blackouts without so much as a by your leave. Or as in the most recent case, by the voice in her head she thought now had probably always been Missy. which meant she hadn't a clue how to, on her own, and without prompting, fashion or open a door into that realm, but she had to try. Because among the countless puzzles and questions of this day, one question stood out from the rest, haunting her. She had to at least try to find the answer. Quentin wouldn't approve, she knew that, and she also knew that his likely disapproval was worth paying attention to, for the simple reason that he was far more experienced in psychic matters than she was, consciously at any rate, and very likely knew when something paranormal shouldn't be attempted, which was why she hadn't told him she was going to try this. She made herself comfortable on his bed, lying atop the turned-down covers, propped up with an extra pillow. She turned off all but the lamp on the nightstand so that the room was only softly lighted. Even as she closed her eyes and tried to relax, Diana was aware of the nagging notion that attempting this so near in time and place to a vicious murder was probably not the safest thing she could have done. That didn't stop her either. Not knowing how else to do it, she breathed steadily, evenly, and concentrated on trying to make herself boneless, limp, one muscle at a time, limb by limb. Then, when she felt as relaxed as she was likely to become, she tried to visualize a door. Rather, to her surprise, it was very easy to do, forming rapidly in her mind's eye as though it just stood before her. And to her increasing uneasiness, the door was green. Diana hesitated, but in the end, her need to find the answer to the question haunting her was stronger even than her instincts for self-preservation. She reached out and grasped the doorknob, surprised to feel it as though it were actually real, and turned it. She opened the door and stepped through into the gray time. A long corridor stretched before her, cold and gray and virtually featureless. Diana hesitated again, still holding the door open as she half turned to gaze back through it. Eerily, she saw Quentin's bedroom, the lamp on the nightstand glowing warmly, the turned-back covers and bank pillows, the empty bed. "I'm here," she heard herself murmur, her voice, as always, hollow in the gray time. "I'm here physically." She hadn't counted on that. This is not a good idea. Startled, Diana turned quickly back to the corridor, and the doorknob slipped from her hand. She found herself facing the little girl who had guided her down to the stables, Becca. "You're not supposed to be here, not yet," Becca told her. Diana glanced back over her shoulder to see the green door close behind her. "As long as I remember where this door is, I can get back," she said. Becca shook her head. "That's not the way things work here. The door won't be in the same place. The place won't be in the same place." "I'm not in the mood for riddles, Becca." The little girl heaved a sigh. "It's not a riddle, it's just the way things are. You'll remember if you think about it. You made the door, so you carry it with you, sort of. Then I'll be able to find it if I need to leave in a hurry, won't I?" "I hope so." Diana tried to pretend to herself the little chill she felt was entirely due to the usual coldness of the gray time, rather than to the child's obvious doubt. "Where's Missy?" she asked Becca. Becca cocked her head to one side as though listening to some distant sound. "You really shouldn't be here, Diana. Killing Ellie was just the start. It knows about you now, and it wants you." "Why?" Diana asked as steadily as she could manage. "Because you're finding the secrets. You found Jeremy's bones. You found the trapdoor and the caves. You found the picture of you and Missy. But those are just pieces of the puzzle. And you have almost all of them now. You'll be able to help us stop it this time." Her certainty wavered. "I think." That didn't reassure Diana very much. "Look, Becca, I need to talk to Missy." Missy isn't here anymore.